Howdy again. It's going to be a slight detour from what we were talking about yesterday. Yesterday I talked to everybody about, everybody that cared to listen to my monologue about spiritual warfare. So I thought I'd share a little bit of what I know about secular, temporal warfare. I come from a family of veterans. I'm a veteran. One thing we always do when we consider, I joined the Army quite a few years ago now that I think about it, but mainly joined the Army for money for college. Whenever you're in the military, you have to study war. You don't have much of a choice. You have to consider what the enemy's going to do when dealing with you, and how you counteract that. This may sound a little familiar to everybody, but the very first thing whenever an army goes to battle, a secular army, you want to go in and have as few of your own casualties as you possibly can. That means you need to soften the enemy. If you've ever seen the movie We Were Soldiers, it's a good book. I recommend it if you want to understand what went wrong in Vietnam. And quite frankly, I think that the big thing about any war is if you are going to go into it, you either go in it to win it or you just don't. And that's nothing against our soldiers that fought in that war. They went there in honor to do their duty, or that they were drafted. I had an uncle that was drafted. I had other uncles that were not drafted, but they were career military. Regardless, it's not the soldier's responsibility to win the tactical side of things. That's up to the generals. The generals and the ranks on down, colonel, major, everybody that's involved in directing troops in battle to win strategic parts of the conflict. Because if your general's not in it to win it, then you're never going to win anything. And it seems to me, from what I read, that after Colonel Moore told General Westmoreland what was going on, and that we were fighting a determined enemy on his own turf, Westmoreland, he thought it was all about numbers. Well, it wasn't about numbers then. It may be about numbers now. We don't know. But the very first thing that you see happening in that in the war in the Ia Drang Valley was that they did, and the Vietnamese, the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army got used to this. The very first thing that we would do is we'd soften up the battlefield by lobbing a whole bunch of artillery shells in there, because, hey, you know what? Your enemy's head's going to be down, ain't it? they're not going to want to be hanging around somewhere where somebody's lobbing a bunch of lead in on them. Well, we're in a new world as far as battles are concerned, where you don't want to turn the dirt into a bunch of potholes or craters. You want to be able to seize the land, which is with as little damage to whatever assets are on that land as possible. Well, some of the doctrine that I learned was, if you're going to go into an area, the very first thing you want to do is you want to flood the area with a biological or a chemical agent that's going to make people either sick or dead. If this is starting to sound familiar, I assure you it is correct. It's Army training doctrine. You use either a nerve agent or a blood agent or a biological weapon, which is generally speaking a virus, or and biological is one of the absolute hardest things to fight. Okay? Make no mistake about it. If we had gone to war with Russia, we probably would have fired missiles at first and then resorted to biological or chemical weapons later. The Russians definitely would have done the same. I'm not entirely sure, except for the fact that communism is the enemy of free people everywhere. Okay? Communism is just another kingdom by another name, where the minority rules the majority with an iron fist and no mercy, no compassion. They want to wring whatever they can out of you while they have you under their sway, which basically means they lord over you and decide whether or not you live or die. Well, you'll notice right now we may have a little bit of that going on. And our politicians don't seem to understand that we are under fire and they're doing what they can to conquer us right now. All I gotta do is look and see what the situation is. Okay. I hate to tell some of the people out there, I'm not a whack job. I studied this stuff for years. My dad taught me a lot of it. My dad taught me Ranger tactics, guerrilla warfare. I'm in no position whatsoever to deal with them because everything that I learned was antique, and I'm getting old and tired. But I still have the knowledge. Probably makes me a target. But Satan does the same thing. He releases stuff into, because the main focal point of Satan's attacks, let's get back to the spiritual warfare for a little while, is he wants to take and disable you spiritually. Make it so that you think 2 or 3 times about telling somebody about Jesus Christ and how he can save you from your sins. The same thing happens on a secular basis too. They want you to think 2 or 3 times about actually going to war against anybody, because yes, we are, as Christians, we're in a war. We're soldiers. The Bible tells us to put on the whole armor of God: helmet of salvation, breastplate of righteousness, the shield of faith, gird our loins up. It is all well illustrated in the armor of the Roman soldier at the time, whenever it was written. God wants us to be able to stand against the arrows of the devil. Right now, I don't think that our country has got its armor on. I really don't. I feel like our politicians are weak and confused and unable. They can't handle this biological warfare stuff. For one thing, they won't even acknowledge that it exists. They're too busy arguing about it and telling everybody that you're just imagining that. Well, we were taught to expect it. Very first thing, whenever any kind of agent, and we used to had to set out alarms all over all around wherever we were based out in the field, to detect biological and chemical weapons. Nuclear, pretty much if we got hit with nuclear, and there's several different types of nuclear, but the primary one we were dealing with whenever I was in, because I was in during the Cold War, was a nuclear bomb. And if that happened, that game over. I mean, you're not going to live very long. As a medic, we used to have an expression. It was real simple, to the point. Whenever it came to certain types of agents, we used to kind of tongue-in-cheek, but not, because we cared about our soldiers, our buddies. These were our friends. And quite frankly, every soldier, very rarely are you going to find a soldier that isn't going to have brotherly love towards another soldier. Because we're a team. We're in it together. We understand everybody's constantly, there's no I in team. Well, the civilian world, you see that, but I don't think you see it as much in the civilian world as you do in the military, because your lives depend on each other. You could die because somebody didn't do their part. Not so in the civilian world, unless you're a professional operative. And even then, I don't consider that the civilian world, really. I mean, some of them contractors, they're a lot tougher than a lot of the soldiers I was in with. They were a lot tougher than I was whenever I was young. But in a lot of ways, I think our politicians are holding us up from defending ourselves, because they're too busy playing politics with the facts, instead of actually going, hey, you know what? We need to put up a better defense. We should have shut down all travel to the Far East as soon as we found out stuff was going on over there that didn't add up, didn't make sense. But I'm not making those decisions. I would have shut the whole thing down. Why? It's smart. And I would have shut up all of our borders. Our borders should be closed right now. Why? Because there's more than one country coming across our border. That right there on its own is suspicious. If you do not have borders, the Bible's pretty specific about this. Look up the word landmark. in the Old Testament. Those people that do not respect the landmarks, and that's fences, that's landmarks. If you've ever been in, in Oklahoma or some other reservation states, there's actual landmarks. They look like little spears sticking out of the ground. They're made out of marble or rocks or whatever you want to call it, carved out, and they have dates and stuff carved into them. This is such and such tribal lands, pretty much saying, when you're here, you'll know once you pass this area, you're in the tribal land, and it should be that way. But if you don't respect the borders of another country, you're not going to respect anything else. And I hate to break it to everybody that's crossing that border. By the time that they get established here, there's not going to be freedom for them to enjoy. There's not going to be prosperity. Why? Because the people in the government right now are tyrants. The people that destroyed Portland, set up autonomous zones, told everybody to ban the police and defund them, which is quite frankly garbage. We should support our law enforcement. They help protect us. They are the first line of defense against criminals. But they're right now running as far away from defunding the police as they can because, hey, you know what? They did some polling and they found out it doesn't sell too good on the marquee. But honestly, I don't know if our votes may or may not still matter anymore. They're finding fraud and denying that the fraud exists. And now what? Stalin said, and I think he may have been misquoted on a lot of this stuff, but he basically said it doesn't matter who votes, it only matters who counts the votes. Well, that's right, especially if you're crooked as Stalin was. Stalin was a mass murderer. 20 million Jews. Just Jews. That's not counting everybody else he killed. They died. Why? Because he felt like it, pretty much. Do we really want that kind of government here in the United States? Because if we allow it to happen, and I think that the fraud's been going on a lot longer than we've ever even considered. For crying out loud, the Democrats threw a fit in 2016 screaming that Donald Trump was an illegitimate president. Now they're denying any kind of fraud happened anywhere now. So they're talking out both sides of their mouth. But tactically speaking, we've been caught with our pants down is what's going on. But anyway, I know it's a long diatribe. But you send in something to soften up the area, and you already have your troops with an antidote, so that when they follow it, their enemies are all dead. You make it something that's impossible to defend from, and biological, that is the worst. I mean, chemical is one thing. Nerve agents will mess you up for life. Blood agents too. Nerve agent will more likely kill you than anything else. I mean, some of the stuff that we did in our field hospital for nerve agent was like, you strip them down, you peel them like a rabbit, cut off all their clothes, and then scrub them down with these brushes that nobody really wants to have used on them because, I mean, they're rough. It's It's to remove the first level, or the first 2 or 3 layers, and maybe 5 layers of skin, okay? Because it gets that deep. Nerve agent will mess up your brain, will mess up your complete nervous system. You'll lose your control of your bodily functions, causes heart palpitations, all kinds of stuff. Blood agent basically just sucks the oxygen out of your blood, and CS gas, that's a blood agent. A lot of people don't think about that. I know, because they used a mild form of that on us in basic training to train us for a gas chamber. You put it in a little pot, you light it. Not pot as in marijuana, I mean it's a little pot, and you light it. It has to be lit because it's the fumes from it that propel it up into the air and gets into your lungs and causes you to choke on it, because once it gets in your lungs, it blocks the oxygen from being absorbed into your lungs, and your blood turns purple. Why? Because there's no oxygen in it, or very little. I enjoyed going through the gas chamber because I wound up, because quite frankly I was very immature at the time, I wound up going through it twice. The drill instructor made sure I got a good dose, and that's okay. That was his job to train me. Anyway, a brief aside, the only way you can use CS gas out of a M2 Bradley is with a flammable liquid. Consider that. Usually they use diesel. Anyway, you soften up your enemy's territory. You soften up your enemy's territory. You send in troops afterwards that are prepared to deal with whatever the agent was that you sent in, and your opposition's already been taken out. See the pattern we're dealing with here? Anybody else that's there, you go ahead and shoot them. If they've gotten through that first, then chances are they're prepared. So you go ahead and you want to take them out surgically, though. You don't want to damage the territory. You want to keep what's there. In other words, we're being conquered, and our politicians are letting it happen. Pray for the United States. Pray for each other. Pray for your church leaders. And I'll keep all of you in prayer too. God bless you.